Good afternoon and welcome to Lunchtime Coaching. My name is Britz. I'm a leadership coach, trainer, and international leadership facilitator, host of the Lunchtime series where we add value to people's lives happening every day at 12 on ebizradio.com. We had such an awesome response from our previous toxic relationships conversation with our specialist, Natasha Williams. And today she's back. We're back to talk more toxic relationships, but a nice, interesting topic. Natasha, welcome to Lunchtime Coaching. How are you doing?
Great. Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, thank you. We had a really good response to the last conversation we had, and so we just really, obviously this is a touchy subject for people. It comes up a lot. Recently, I've just spoken to the a foundation in Cape Town who does a lot of dealing with trauma in children. So it's, I think the subject of mental health and how we're currently doing and what's happening in our world is so important. But don't you want to sort of just recap from where we left off last time in our conversation, and sort of give us an entry of where we're going to today?
Well, last week we were really looking at what is a narcissist. What are the red flags? How do you identify who a narcissist actually is? So today I would actually kind of elaborate on how that actually plays out in people's lives, and how to identify whether you yourself has got narcissistic tendencies, because a lot of people ask me that question because they're responding to the narcissist and then they think maybe they are the one that's the problem.
Absolutely. And I mean, to kick that off, so how do we know how a narcissist is created? Because I think a lot of the time people just go, they may be quite accusatory about it, and it's like, oh, absolutely, you're just a narcissist. But what are those fundamentals? How does this come about in someone's world, and how do they, where is the sort of root cause from becoming a narcissist?
Yeah, look, first of all, there's a question of, are they born that way or are they created that way? So first, I'd like to say there is a predisposition towards a certain way. You could have two children growing up in the same family, and one will be a narcissist and one won't. So why is that? And the reason is narcissism is a person takes everything as a reflection of themselves. They take everything personally. It's all about self-gain and not about anybody else. And so if there's a narcissistic parent or both parents, they will either take one of the children under their wing and only recognize the positive traits that they see reflected of the child in themselves. And then they only talk about those traits. And anything that they see that there's a negative trait in their mind that maybe is going to make them look bad in the eyes of others, they'll completely annihilate. So the child is schismed. There's a part of them that is elevated. They don't have to do anything. They don't have to have any achievements. They just have to exist. And the parent will put them on a pedestal. And then anything that they don't like, they will take away. And either they'll become a grandiose narcissist, which is somebody that is, entitled. They just think they're so magnificent. They walk in the door. I mean, I used to joke, but my ex-husband was like that. We went to a restaurant once, and the waiter pulled out a chair for me, and he sat down on it.
Wow.
Because, it's all about him, right? But you also get the other narcissists that have been really severely abused. And so what happens is they learn that it's a power struggle. It's a power game. If I'm not in control, then I'm being controlled. So I don't want to be bullied. And they're coming from a place of such fear that they turn the fear into anger, because anger's got a higher vibration than fear. And so they say, I will be the one controlling, and I will stand on you so that you can never bully me again. And so it's kind of like a self-defense mechanism. And that's how it then plays out, because they can't go there, But yeah.
So that's really, so it's surprising to think that, it can be a disposition, because you're kind of going, oh, well, I was born this way, so tough, deal with it.
Yeah.
But So if I have to kind of ask myself the point blank question, am I a narcissist? What are those things that I'm starting to want to pay attention to? Because, you know, when we preface this conversation, I was thinking about it is, where is the fine line by me saying, no, I'm self-preserving and wanting to look after myself, and what you're doing is not okay, and just being a narcissist and being an ass about it. So like, where's that measurement? How do we gain that? How do we gauge that?
Okay, so we've all got positive and negative traits. We've all got narcissistic traits, and we've got empathic traits. So if you took a spectrum, on the spectrum where most people are in the middle of a bell curve, they've got a bit of positive and a bit of self-deprecation. The narcissist is on the one extreme. They don't have feeling. They don't have empathy. They don't have emotion. They don't care about others. It's all about themselves and what they can gain out of it. So it's all about immediate gratification. Where the empath, which is the person who attracts the narcissist, is exactly on the other end of the scale. So they are putting everybody else forwards. They say everybody else deserves more. Who am I? You know, I feel too much. I have too much feeling. And I don't want to take advantage of anybody. I don't want to abuse them. So they completely have suppressed their narcissistic traits. So that's why they kind of balance each other out in that sense. To me, they make the perfect partner, because it's kind of like the angel and the devil coming together, trying to neutralize.
Yeah, but it's scary that you say that, because often that really is the case. You know, these two opposites really attract each other in a big way in a relationship. But it's still, although they're feeding each other completely from their own source of who they need to be, it's still an unhealthy relationship, right?
Absolutely, because the empath loves themselves by loving somebody else. So they say, if I love you enough, then you'll love me back. If I give you something, then you'll give it back to me. So it's done not conditionally. They see that as people are in a give and take relationship. The problem is the narcissist just sees you as somebody that gives. You're the giver and I'm the taker. So I'll just take. So the empath gives, and then they give their hand, and then the narcissist wants their arm, and then they give their arm, and then they want the body. And so they'll just keep giving. And it's when the empath wakes up one day and says, hang on, I've given too much. When am I going to get back now? That suddenly the veil's lifted. Suddenly they realize they're actually dealing with another kind of beast altogether. And so they need to actually improve their own narcissistic traits. They need to allow those to integrate in themselves. They need to learn to say, I am allowed. I am also deserving. I can also take. So the narcissist is actually teaching them to have narcissistic traits on the outside, not hidden, not buried, not suppressed. And the empath is trying to teach the narcissist how to feel, what love is, what emotion is. And of course, the narcissist isn't interested in that. So they're both pushing each other away on two things that are both equally important.
So, you know, as you're speaking, what sort of really, and I know you and I, you're my coach, so I often I need to gauge like where my brain's sitting at. But when it comes to significance or the human needs from both aspects, so we know that significance is a human need. Tony Robbins speaks about it very often. Is it strange to be able to be in observation that as an empath, they're needing significance from that perspective, but as a narcissist, they're needing exactly the same, and they're just doing the opposite behavior?
Correct.
And how do we get back to the middle point? Because, you know, if you're an empath and you're just allowing this, it's so debilitating. It so takes away from your life. But as a narcissist, you're kind of going, well, this is just who I am. This is how I do stuff. How do we get back to having a bit of an even keel? Is there a process for us to be able to do this? Or is it just kind of like, oh, well, I'm sorry, you're a narcissist.
First of all, the empath is willing to do whatever it takes. They're willing to do the work. They know that if I have to go study more or work harder, I'll do it. The narcissist take is, I don't have to do any work. You must do the work. I'm just here to be present. I'm good enough being in your presence. And so they are not used to work. And if they had to start, they know that they won't be recognized for the work. That's why they go from job to job to job. They cannot look in. They don't want to internalize anything. Where the empath is prepared to look in. The problem is they're doing everything for everybody else except themselves. So if you want to have an equal balance, you've got to integrate it in yourself. The empath needs to start setting boundaries and saying no to others and yes to self. And the narcissist needs to start picking up these tools, as it were, and go and do some work and go and do some inner reflection. But they're not prepared to do that. So if you want to change the dynamic, then it's up to the empath to do it.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, because that's my next question. Well, if you're a narcissist, you're kind of going, oh, well, I don't need to do this. This is not for me. I don't care. Go away. This is all about me. And why should I do the work?
Exactly. I'll find someone else who's prepared to put up with it. You know, if you're not going to give it, I'll get it from someone else.
So do you ever find that narcissists are willing to do the work?
No. Yeah. Yes, if there's enough pain. And yes, it's a tedious, long process. And I've heard of one of the coaches who actually does work with them, funnily enough. And they say it's a 12-step process. But to get them past the point of just stage 1, where they're willing to own their own bad behaviors, is very difficult. So until they actually acknowledge, but you know, that's part of life. We don't want to look at our narcissistic traits. They're our greatest teachers. You know, they are showing you what you are not in the outside world, what you're not willing to acknowledge in yourself on the inside.
Yeah. And you know, it's funny that you mentioned that, because being in the position that we're in, especially now, you know, being so open to the world, and I hold myself to such a high degree on how am I showing up? How do I show up? How do I behave? What am I saying? Like, it's quite exhausting, because I want to make sure that there's congruency in what I'm doing and saying and behaving and actioning. But it's so important to be able to have that gauge for yourself to kind of go, how congruent are you in your behaviors? And if it's all about you the whole time, then you kind of have to go, like, check yourself before you wreck yourself kind of moment. So don't you want to give us like practical examples, maybe 3 examples that you've that you've worked with people, just so people can see the different things that show up in maybe in a relationship setting, and maybe in a work setting, and maybe in a child parent kind of role? Do you have like scenarios that you can share with us to sort of gauge what that looks like?
How the dynamic is between the people?
About, like with a narcissist, how a narcissist would show up. Like, for example, in a relationship, you mentioned the waiter pulling out the chair and he went and sat down. Yeah. What other things like that do you notice in relationships?
It's mostly men, so I'll say it as if it's men, but I mean, I'm saying women are also narcissists too. But let's say you're in in a relationship where the woman is the breadwinner, and the guy is just quite happy to live off her, and she can keep paying. And when she starts saying, listen, when are you going to start contributing? You'll have all sorts of excuses like, I can't find work, or this thing isn't good enough for me. You know, I'm at a higher level. I deserve, you know, to have this thing, and people don't acknowledge my worth. So they kind of talk around in circles. They have this like grandiose way about them that, you know, they're too good for the world out there. But they're not even willing to try. They're not even willing to set foot out there. Or they'll just be very abusive. I mean, if there's any kind of abuse, if there's physical or whatever, they will never take responsibility for anything. They will always turn it on you. They will blame their bad behavior on your emotional state or something you did that made them that way. So they're constantly deflecting back onto you, and you'll end up becoming defensive. So, I mean, there's lots of red flags. We did discuss them last week, but you'll see the dynamic where you start feeling like your world's getting smaller, and they are controlling, very, very controlling. and other people don't see it. They've got their wear two masks. So the one that the public sees and the one and you start doubting yourself. You really start wondering, am I making this up? You know, I'm confused. I had a client actually phone me the other day and she said, I don't know. Was I married to a narcissist? You know, and I said, I don't know the guy, but he has all the red flags. But how did he make you feel? If you feel like less of a person, that's a sure sign that he's not good for you, you know, whether he is or isn't. In a work situation, yes.
Yeah, so in a work situation, I was just going to say, because everything you're mentioning now, it sounds very similar to what a work situation could be.
Absolutely. Because I mean, I had a client as well who actually was working in one of these corporates, and she worked so hard to become head of HR. She studied for 5 years and she got a new manager. And this woman totally undermined her work. You know, they'll come in. She actually told her to her face, "You're the kind of person we work out." So, you know, it's veiled threats. They will record you, but you can't record them. And it's not just them, and especially if it's coming from management, you know, there's smoke screens all the time. They will make out that it's her bad emotional behavior that caused all of this to happen in the first place, where her emotional behavior was a reaction to the way they were treating her. So her work was never recognized. They would agree on something and then they would change the whole thing and tell her she got it all wrong, or should be given certain staff and then they would go and give the staff other directives to do. You know, so the behavior, like you said earlier, is not congruent. You're trying to be congruent. They are not congruent. And so initially you don't know what you're dealing with. But if you are in a corporate environment, I haven't seen much hope. The only hope that I've seen is leave that work. It's not a healthy environment. Then you're not going to win. Unless there are other people that are also seeing what's going on and you can expose them in some way, that they eventually do leave. There are ways to do it, but it's tough. It's very tough.
I remember, like, as you're speaking now, I remember being in a situation where I had a business partner, and because of her title, I kind of put her title above mine, and kind of, although we were business partners, a lot of what happened in this relationship the whole time, I eventually got to a point where I was going, no, I'm really not crazy. I'm really not crazy. I know that this, I've followed the rules. And then when I started asking, you know, questions about what was going wrong, it was never her, because she was this person and she had this title. And I eventually went, oh, okay, now I'm getting like the theme here. And because of her title, she hid behind that title as if that was the law of the land.
Right.
And I was going, well, no, but that's not okay, because you do it, it's okay. But if I do it, it's unheard of. It's uncalled for. So yeah, it's actually, I think it probably happens more than we care to realize or acknowledge.
Well, it happens in our governments. And look what happens to the whistleblowers. They're the ones that get taken out. They will literally, they will ruin your life. They will go out of their way. I mean, this same lady actually got retrenched, or they didn't retrench her. They actually had a disciplinary, and it was all agreed that she was the one in the wrong. After all she was trying to do was just fight for her rights and the rights of the others in the office.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah. So in terms of parent-child relationship, because yeah, I can only imagine. I remember one specific moment where I overpowered my daughter, and I yelled at her, and I remember in the shock in her face that she was so shocked, and it happened once only, and I remember seeing her thinking, oh my goodness, have I just turned into that dad? And I stopped and I went down on my knees and I stood in front of her. I said to her, I'm sorry for shouting at you like that. That will never happen again. But I remember consciously thinking, wow, Kevin, I can't believe you just did that. And I the fact that I recognized, I was like, oh, wow, I don't want to be that dad. I don't want that to be my relationship with my daughter. But do you often find that in terms of parent-child relationships where I'm your dad, I'm your mother, you're supposed to listen to me, do what I say, kind of, is that the relationship that plays out? How does it play out in parents?
Well, just as a narcissist is made, so is an empath. they will have had a narcissistic parent, so they chose the other route. They learned that if I walk on eggshells, I don't know what to expect. I don't know how my parent's going to come home. They need to feel the emotional state in the room before they can act. So they are very highly emotionally tuned because that's the only way that they can be safe. So they would also have had a narcissistic parent, and maybe one of the parents was abusive. So that is why it's so critical to heal your childhood, because it comes from childhood. If you're in any kind of narcissistic situation, you will see it will be your friends, your work colleagues, it'll be around you all the time because it's something that your subconscious mind is familiar with. So if you want to change that pattern, you've got to change the way that it sees things, the way that it understands things. And I mean, for me, it was not so much control as it was not knowing where the control was. Everybody was kind of doing their own thing. It was more of a neglectful situation than a control situation. And so, yes, we just decide we don't want to be hurting anybody. We don't like that. So we're going to take the other stance that says I'll never hurt anybody at the cost of myself.
Yeah, it's usually at the cost of yourself. Yeah. So in terms of some advice that you can sort of give, so like, what do we do? So how do I go from being aware of negative behaviors or disabling behaviors or debilitating myself to kind of going, okay, well, this is what I'm recognizing, or this is a trigger that I have. How do I gradually start working into a new place, into a new space in my head, if I'm recognizing negative behaviors?
Firstly, I call it lawyering. Become like a lawyer, okay? They just see the facts. When you're an empath, you tend to take everything emotionally and you're trying to read into it. And, am I sure? What's the fact? The fact is, he said he'd fetch me at 8, he didn't arrive. That's the fact.
Yeah.
Okay, so does his behavior match his deeds? No, it doesn't. His talk. So look at the facts. And then they make a lot about it's about the other person. And I'm saying, what about you? Even if they are or if they aren't, is this how you want to be treated? Is this the kind of work environment that works for you? Or are you so busy trying to prove to the world that this person is bad to you? Can you not just leave? And that's the thing is get into your own power. And then the third, which everybody does know about, it's about boundaries. Because a narcissist doesn't want you to be you and me. They want you to be a mini me. So they literally take over your life. They become like you become their minion, their servant, their fuel, their food. So you have to lose your values, your friendships, your family, everything that you work for, maybe even your career, they might tell you to give that up, to become them. And so you need to not let that happen. So you've got to keep boundaries, and that means standing your ground, not getting sucked into their arguments, not allowing them to try and confuse your mind, and also physical boundaries. They will check your phone, they'll phone you 50 times, they'll be all over your social media, they will be in your physical space all the time. They never give you a moment's rest, because they know that if you've had a moment, then you're going to separate from them and you're going to start seeing through them again. So boundaries, super important. And they're our greatest teacher, because empaths don't have boundaries. That's what they need to learn. They need to actually say it, because people are not mind readers. And a narcissist doesn't take no. They don't hear no. No doesn't exist in their vocabulary. So you have to be firm, and they will only take you as seriously as you take you seriously.
Absolutely. So how do we solve this? If we get to, I mean, you've given us these 3 steps now, and how do we maybe solve is the wrong word. How do we resolve ourselves with okay, this is the situation? Because I think, when people have been married for 20 years, or they've been in a position in work for a long period of time, it's their security, it's their reality, it's all they know. How do I get to that space where I kind of, I know what answer I would give, but I want you to give the answer on like, how do I get my brain to recognize, oh wow, this is not okay for me. This is not a good space.
Interesting, because I often ask a lot of my clients, what's the trigger for you to leave? And they've all got different triggers. Like you've all got a line that people cross, you know. For some, it's when they land up in hospital and he's beaten up one too many times. For another, it might be, okay, he touched me and that's the line. So you've got to say, like, they're all living in hope that someday this person's going to change. And I'm back to the reality check. They're living in a fantasy. They're living in an idealistic world of what the world should be and how these people should treat them better and should see them for what they are. But they're not looking at the facts. The fact is they're not. They're not treating you well. They're not getting a job. They're not improving on their life. Or they do have a job, but they're horrible people. They treat the waiters bad. They shout and insult everybody. You know, so, but on another note, I don't ever think narcissism will leave. Because it's the same reason why we have doctors. There's always new diseases coming up so that the doctors can always have a job. You know, it's like constant progression of the human race. So you need these people to push you to grow. And then the more you learn, the more they learn from you, so that they become more, whatever, secretive or whatever around how they control you. And so you have to keep upping your game. And that's how we grow as a society. So it's kind of like a little cat and mouse game. But we're living in a world of duality. So yes, you just got to say, I don't allow this anymore. And I see it again with what's going on in the world right now. Is people are having to stand in their own truth. And for as long as they let somebody else's truth dominate over them, they'll always be unhappy. So if you're not happy, there's your sign. Okay, it's not about making the other person responsible for you. It's about you being responsible for you and then deciding whether that works for you or not, whether that person works for you.
You know, don't you, I want to close this kind of this entire conversation with, don't you think it inevitably is the blanket of self-love and self-worth, either way, whether you're a narcissist or an empath, that loving yourself, like you really need to get to a point where you're okay and you're not needing an external validation, or you're not needing that external reference source? Yes. Or do you think it's that one core thing, that how the hell do I love myself more?
Well, absolutely. The difference is they're acting it out in the opposite extremes. So the empath comes from a place of guilt and shame. So they're at the lower end of the spectrum, where they feel like everybody else is better than them, low self-worth. And then the narcissist is on the top end of that low scale, which is pride and anger. And when you're in pride and anger, it's all about, I'm better than everybody else. But it also comes from a place of low self-worth. You've got to transcend that. When you integrate those two, then you find the self-worth. Because we need to look after ourselves. You can't take care of somebody else if you can't even take care of you. I hear so many people say, I want to help clothe the poor, but I don't even have clothes myself. Well, I don't know how you're going to do that. You know, if you don't have connections, you don't have anything. That's a escape mechanism. That's a reaction. It's not coming from a place of genuine power.
Yeah, you know, as you talk, I mean, I just think from my previous relationship that I had was, and you and I have spoken about about that. For me, it was a lot of going through that and asking myself, well, what love do I need to show up for me in the world? And if it does, how do I love me? How do I love me? And I wanted to cultivate that so that it showed up vibrationally, so that whoever came into my world felt that more specifically. And I think for me personally, it was always listening, or not wanting to listen to that little voice where it said to me, I'm not sure about this. I'm not sure about this. I'm not sure. And you kind of go, I'll be fine. You'll be fine. And then 6 months later, you're going, oh my God, this is the worst decision of my life. Like, why did I do this, right? But I, you know, for me, and I think it's something I still work at. It's something I share with everyone as much as I can, around how important loving yourself and paying attention to why you are you and what's beautiful about that, and really just gaining that feeling without having that external validation or external resource. But I, you know, for me, it's always so interesting, and I know you, like me, love human behavior. So, if encapsulating to today's conversation, what are the takeaways? What are the things that we need to know about narcissism, and what's the final word that you have for us today on this?
If you want to change the world, you start by looking at the man in the mirror. When you heal your own inadequacies or your own lack or whatever it is, then you don't need the validation from anybody else outside. It won't bother you whether somebody said something bad or beat you up or whatever, because you know who you are. So it's all about, you know, there's that saying about the wise men that say, where shall we hide the secrets, you know? And somebody said, well, let's put it inside man, because that's the place they don't look. They look everywhere else. They'll go to the stars, they'll go to the deepest ocean, but they won't.
That's so true, right?
And the answers are all inside. But the thing is, we don't know how to access them. And there's enough people out there that teach that, you know, that can show you how to do it, but you've got to do the work. You've got to go inside, and that's scary. Like you said, it's out of your comfort zone. You know, people say, why must I change? He's the one treating me bad. Well, the fact is, you're the one staying in the bad treatment. So what are you going to do about it? It's not going to change. It's like complaining about the weather. It's not going to change. Put a raincoat on. You know,
I so love that you say that, because, you know, when I have occurrences in life today, or I have an engagement with someone or something weird shows up, and my immediate, like my first go-to conversation with myself is, how am I part of this? What role am I playing here?
Yes.
Because I know that if this is showing up in my world, I'm going, okay, what is my focus about? Where am I paying attention? Like, how is my energy being put out? Like, how am I generating this and pulling this into existence? Because if it's not something I want, then like, why is it showing up? You know, so absolutely. You know, look at your, look at yourself, start with you. And that's the most important thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Natasha, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for giving us some insight on narcissism. I find this so interesting, and I'm so going to be checking out my own behavior and kind of going, why does this apply? Doesn't it apply? But I do think it's so important. I think it's so important to be able to have these conversations, and we need to have more of them. So please come back with more information, and and I'll chat to you soon.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, everybody.
Have a lovely day. Thanks, Natasha. Cheers. Bye.
Bye.